Hello. I am the lead dev of Ireland for Red Liberty. You can call me Jack. And today we will be looking at the Ireland teaser. Again for Red Liberty. Well, I suppose the first thing we'll be wanting to look at is the Michael Collins portrait. Michael Collins, my first love, my pride and joy. My middle name is Colin, actually, named for Collins. Um, this was made by our lovely portrait maker, or portraiteur, I suppose, GZ. And if we come over here to the description of him, well, you can see sort of a general description of his early life, and then it goes on to note some changes that I'm sure anyone interested in Irish history would pick up on. Um, Michael Collins in this universe sort of emerged from the Easter Rising in a far stronger position than he did in our timeline. Essentially, after his release from Frongoch internment camp, he became a close personal friend of Sean McDermott, who in the Red Liberty timeline survived execution after 1916, the 1916 Easter Rising, that is. And Collins, being his, close confidant and sort of second in command, rocketed Collins to a far, I would say, more important position from the very start than he had in real life. And so, when McDermott died of polio in 1918, because he had polio during the Rising, Collins was the one to proclaim the first Dáil. And, well, he was basically considered like the undisputed head of the nationalist movement at the time. Now, the Irish War of Independence in the Red Liberty timeline isn't nearly as clear-cut as it was in ours, because, well, alongside McDermott surviving execution, a certain socialist did as well, and the survival of James Connolly led to a strong and independent Irish citizen army. And that, in turn, led to the IRA having less socialist elements in its rank because they were sort of vacuumed away by the ICA. And this meant that although they were both fighting the same foe, it was really the ICA and IRA sort of competing against one another for I don't even know what the to be the liberators of Ireland. And so, when the War of Independence ended, and Collins was called to negotiate, or when it was going to end, and Collins was called to negotiate the peace, the ICA were sort of left out in the cold. That left a lot of resentment between the two, and it fostered the Irish Civil War, even though, well, it fostered the Irish Civil War because the 6 counties in the north, although the south gained complete independence, unlike in the real life timeline, the 6 counties in the north stayed under Britain, partially as a result of Collins and some of his advisors not wanting to destabilize the Republic by having Protestants or militant Protestants in the country from its inception, and partially because of the democratic mandate of the Irish people calling for an end to the war, which was a real thing in our timeline. But whatever the reasons for the North not joining the South, the Civil War happened, and it was namely between the ICA and the IRA, actually. Although some hardline Republican elements of the IRA, including those led by figures like Cathal Brugha, they didn't directly join the Irish Citizen Army, but they switched sides and became sort of a subsidiary for the duration of the Civil War. And now, that having been said, let's move on to the national spirits. Very first, we have the Anglo-Irish Trade War, which is, I would say, a result of, well, the protectionist economic policies of Collins Ireland. Essentially, the basis of it was, protecting the Irish farmers and the Irish economy from the very, very large and sort of predatory economy just across the water, resulted in Ireland imposing incredibly high tariffs on British goods, and Britain, in retaliation, imposed their own tariffs, which Ireland really could not afford. So, in the end, although Ireland was the one, or actually, that's sort of disingenuous. Another big factor in the Anglo-Irish Trade War was the Irish government's refusal, basically, to pay back loans that the British government had given Irish farmers, or Irish farmers prior to the Irish War of Independence. And you can understand why. Like, the Ireland is a poor country. They didn't feel that they should have to pay for stuff that occurred while Britain owned the country, but the Irish government's refusal to pay back those loans and their protectionist policies are what led Britain to impose their own tariffs, which decimated the Irish economy. And at game start, the Anglo-Irish Trade War, rather, is still ongoing, and really the worst sufferers of it are farmers, because they are just sort of left out in the cold without a big market to sell their products to. Considering the majority of the Irish economy is farming, that is very, very not good. So that gives a big stability hit, and then a big production efficiency cap and negative growth. Then, after that, we have paramilitary violence, which is as a result, well, I would say as a result of the Civil War and the Anglo-Irish Agreement, which led in part to the Civil War, where the North stayed with Britain. And then, in more recent times, at game start particularly, the very sort of anti-opposition politics of Nachi Lochra, the party which Collins founded and is the current leader of, because this party is extremely sort of, I'm not certain how you describe it. They are just very anti-sedition, anti-rebellion, and they're, as a result, incredibly sort of anti-radical in any sense. They don't like socialists because of the Civil War. They don't like hardline nationalists, again, because of the Civil War. And as a result, they have used their sort of monopoly on the Irish Parliament to shut those people out of government. And now, those people have begun joining, radical paramilitaries and causing destruction, I would say, on both sides of the Irish border, so in the north and the south. There have been sort of vigilante executions, bombings in some cases. It's just generally not good. And this gives a recruitable population factor because, people who could be joining the official Irish military are instead joining these little rebel groups, and another stability hit. You'll notice a pattern with this stability. And finally, for spirits, we have Ireland Divided, which is So Ireland Divided is essentially just the country is increasingly divided and at odds with itself. The the border in the north is a constant issue of I was going to say debate, but more like hatred. Nobody really likes it. The even Collins's party, who agreed to the deal, are sick of it, really. And of course, the deal was only meant to be a stepping stone to a united Ireland. And that, along with the wounds of the Civil War and the frustrations fostered in the War of Independence, have led to just incredible divisiveness within Irish politics. The IRA don't like the ICA. The ICA and IRA don't like the government. Even the Democratic parties, Sinn Féin, Gila Sór, they are unhappy with basically just how much of a sort of exclusionary, like angry force Nachaid Ladhra is. That gives another big stability hit and war support, because although the Irish people they might be very unhappy with each other, they can all, or at least all of the people in the nationalist movement, can agree that Ireland should be united, and most would be willing to take it back, or take the North back, that is. And then we'll move up here to Dáil Éireann. If I may read this, the Dáil Éireann serves as the directly elected lower house of the Oireachtas of the Irish state. And you can see immediately the massive, or I think it's really a bare majority that Nachaid Ladhra has here, but they're all the ones in yellow. And they have maintained roughly that majority since they gained it. And they gained it really when they were founded, because it was Collins heading it, and Collins was considered by many to be the sort of, main figurehead of the independence movement, even if some of the more radicals would now say that he sold the country out. And I should probably explain each of these parties in turn, especially because Gila Sór, Nachaid Ladhra, and Dúin an Níine, I believe that's how you would say Dina with the N in front. All three of them are, I wouldn't say made up necessarily, but they are stand-ins for historical counterparts that would not have formed. So, for instance, there would have been no Fianna Fáil, because some of its key figures were just not able to gain the same support that they were. And because Fianna Fáil never formed, Fine Gael never would have formed. And Dúin an Níine is a sort of a splinter off of the Communist Party. But being very sort of libertarian, they have achieved a higher level of support, and they are more allowed in the Dáil. But Nachaid Ladhra is Collins's party. It's sort of the stand-in for Fianna Fáil, and Gila Sór is sort of its policies are different, I would say, because the people who would have been in Fine Gael are sort of excluded from Parliament as well. But Gila Sór is like the I wouldn't say progressive necessarily, but they're a lot less authoritarian and a lot more pro-modernization than Nachaid Ladhra is. But I should also explain some peculiar things, like with Sinn Féin, because I'm certain a lot of people have noticed, or at least people interested have noticed, that Sinn Féin is authoritarian democracy, which I'm certain people wouldn't think quite fits. And also, I should say, its policies in this timeline in the Red Liberty timeline, that is, are incredibly different than theirs in our timeline at this time. Or maybe not incredibly different, but different. Because as a result of the ICA being stronger and sort of siphoning socialists out of the IRA, and as a result of that, the Irish Workers' League maintaining a prominent national position as the political wing of the ICA, there really are, or there were rather, none of the socialists in Sinn Féin that were there in our timeline that led to Sinn Féin becoming a more sort of left nationalist party. And similarly, Arthur Griffith, the founder of Sinn Féin, he was both not forced out of the party in this timeline, not forced into an agreement with Nachaid Lochra in this timeline, like they were with Fianna Fáil. And thirdly, Arthur Griffith is not dead. By this time in real life, I believe he had... I shouldn't laugh. I believe he had died of literal brain bleed as a result of stress, which did not happen. So because of those three things, Griffith is free to continue leading Sinn Féin, and they are because of those things and also not having the socialist elements, they are a very monarchist party, or at least the leadership of the party are monarchist. But their supporters are sort of, I would say, authoritarian nationalists who are upset with Collins, as well as monarchists and variously sort of people who want a different situation but aren't socialist and don't like the politics of Gilasor. And I think those are the main explanations. So let's move on for now to Cathal Brugha, or this event on him, him being released from prison. Anyone who knows Irish history would know that Cathal Brugha died in the Civil War, but he and a lot of other figures who died or were executed in the Civil War survived in prison because due mostly to Britain not having a hand so much in Irish politics during the Civil War, because Ireland was fully independent, or at least the South was, there really weren't the same executions that there were after the Civil War in real life. Instead, a lot of these people had decade-ish, prison sentences, I suppose, slapped on them. And this has resulted in a massive sort of exacerbation of the whole Ireland divided problem, because all of a sudden, all of these socialists and militant Republicans and hardline nationalists have started pouring out of prison, and the leaders of said groups, especially figures like Jim Larkin, continue, or rather have resumed leadership of their parties, and have risen again to national prominence, much to the chagrin of Nachaid Lochra, who are always looking for ways to hem them in further or to prevent them from participating in politics. And I suppose really that's... Or wait, I would like to say this because I'm very proud of it and I don't know how many people will get it. God Save Ireland, said the heroes. That is a line from the song God Save Ireland, which Cathal Brugha sang as he was bleeding to death during the Easter Rising. Now, both in this timeline and our timeline, he survived bleeding to death in the Easter Rising. But I choose this particular section of the song, God Save Ireland, said the heroes, because Nachaid Lochra, Collins' party, it translates to the first heroes. So, it's sort of a double pun, I guess, with Nachaid Lochra asking for God to save them, or God to save Ireland, now that this how did I describe him? This hero of the people, Cathal Brugha, has been released. I don't know. I'm happy with that. That makes me smile. But I suppose that's about it, or that's about all I wanted to say about troubled days in Ireland. Uh, as the dev of Ireland, I hope everyone who saw this enjoyed it, and um, well, I look forward to the mod eventually being released and everyone being able to play my sort of slightly unhinged creation. Good day, I suppose.